Hello fellow gamers, this is Tim, Samwise7, and today I'm going to be talking about the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons um, World Builders Guidebook. This was the first product that I ever bought about world building, and before this time, everything that I had run, everything that I had done in a campaign, I kind of just made up as I went. I made a really cheesy map that was just very localized, and I never really thought too much about, deities, the cosmology, planes, all those sorts of things. When I found this book, and it's a little chunky, I guess. Um, it's still pretty small. It comes in about 96 pages. Uh, when I found this book, it made me really think about settings that I was making and to try to bring a little bit more realism into them, or tell you when realism can be thrown out the window as long as it has some sort of explanation why. You basically want to give the players some reason to believe in the setting, to kind of immerse themselves in it. And this book really kind of helped me see that. It kind of showed me, basically, what to do and how to design maps, and a little bit of cartography information. And it's pretty much, there's some sociology stuff. It's pretty much all over the board. Um, and it has very good suggestions for someone that's trying to make their own homebrewed setting. And it has some dice rolls and different things. And I like that the book has different approaches to how to do things. So like it says like what is the best approach for me. um, there's the macroscopic, where you start big, you make the gods, you make the big giant map, and then you slowly shrink down. Then there's the microscopic approach, which is kind of what I said about, you have like a small town, and the rest of the map is kind of fuzzy. The GM and the players really don't know what's out there until they bump into it. There's a sociological approach they list, just come up with different cultures. Um, the character base, where you really focus on the characters, and whatever they bring to the table, that's what you make. There's a situation-based approach. That's a little bit harder to kind of detail as of what it kind of does, but it's kind of just like like a hook that you can come up with. And like, okay, I want them to have like pirates that are necromancer pirates, and that would be a hook, and you can just basically make a world around that. There's a historical approach where you just look at different histories, different cultures, and you just kind of base the setting off of those. Uh, the literary approach, which is basically just hey, I like this book, I want to make a setting that's 90% like it, but 10% I want to change. Or you just go, I'm gonna run the Lord of the Rings and use that setting, or I'm gonna run the Hyborian Age and use that setting. And it gives you ideas on how to do things. And there's lots of climates that it lists, and different landforms. Um, Basically, it uses like Earth cultures, but it kind of suggests that you can tweak them a little bit or mix them. Like the Aztecs and the Mayans. You can whip those two together. Maybe like the Aztecs and the conquistadors. Make some sort of strange hybrid culture from real world suggestions. Uh, there's things like class dominance, race dominance, different situations like, and like tribal, post Renaissance, seafaring. Is it a dying world? Is there a deity that's running amok? Are there two deities that are fighting over each other? Is it more sword and sorcery? Are there psionics? Things like that. And every page you go through, it just has lots of just chunky details on everything, like the size of the world, the shape of the world. And this is kind of the neat thing about making your own setting, is that you can have a flat world if you want. If that's what you want to bring to the game, and you want it to be different and kind of mythical, then why not? You can have the inside of a sphere, or the world's a rectangle or a triangle, or there's two triangles floating above each other, and there's some sort of gray mist in between, and whatever you can come up with. It doesn't have to be just like very scientific. In fact, I think I enjoy games where they kind of bring more mythical approaches to things. But it has some real world, like size of planets, how much water, how many percentage of mountains are there in the map. And they have this diagram where you can cut out like these diamonds and fold them into I guess that'd be more like a D8, or like a D20. And it's as close to a globe as you can get without too much distortion. I remember cutting that out and making my little world. There's things like volcano activity, earthquakes, climates, and again, if it's a fantasy world, you can mix and match climates. They don't have to be, Arctic at the top, Arctic at the bottom, and then you work your way towards the equator where it's nice and hot and everybody runs around and barely nothing. But you could have zones of different climates. It doesn't have to be like Earth is. And I think that's what people get stuck in, is that people like Earth settings or Earth-like settings, but you don't have to be stuck with that. You can make whatever you want to make. That's the freedom of imagination, imagination and work. There's things like in here about prevailing winds and how that affects things. If you really want to get into it, and like tectonic plates and how they move, and what happens to the mountains, between tectonic plates, basically where they're crumbling up, basically like social studies kind of stuff. There's populations that it goes through. There's so much cool things, and the artwork in here is pretty sweet actually. It's mostly black and white, or like blue and white, but it's pretty neat. Things like rivers and the shapes they take, or I'm sorry, the shapes the lakes take, or oceans, how much percentage. And then it goes into the races. It's like, what races do you want? And it lists a bunch of standard traditional fantasy races, but don't be limited to those either. You could even just come up with something strange and or some a hybrid and change the name. You don't have to just have your orcs, goblins, and elves. You can make up whatever you want to make. Talislanta is a good idea. A good example of coming up with strange races and seeing what happens. Goes into various kingdoms and how they're run, different organizations, different types of government, and the different types of government is kind of neat. It like for instance, it has lots of forms of government. It details what they all are. Things like confederacy, autocracy, dictatorship, feudalism, okay, I can't pronounce it. Geriatric. Basically, it's ruled by the old. I can't pronounce it. Magocracy, which is basically ruled by wizards. Republic, theocracy, and it's this giant list of what you can do that isn't just your stereotypical like, oh, it's a kingdom, there's a king, who cares? There's all these different forms of government that you can use, and you'd be surprised how much that can affect the flavor of a setting. Well, we're going to go up to this kingdom, and they beat their people almost to death, and they have no freedom up there. So it could be a very oppressive kind of place to adventure in. Like I said, this book is chock full of just helpful suggestions on what you can do with your setting. The size of towns and cities and populations. And like it was saying before, with different approaches, it goes through and has all these things, and you can start on one end of the spectrum, like, okay, we're over here in the little tiny area, we don't know what all the big stuff is, and you can work your way. Or you can start over here. It's like, okay, here's the gods, here's the planet, here's the the freaking solar system, and then you work down to the small stuff. And you can do either one, and it's very kind of flexible in that regard. More cities and towns, how they get along with each other. Example, businesses that are in, things like tile maker, Vinter, weaponsmith, weaver. Things that are basically just like businesses that are in, fantasy towns. It goes through and has a few maps and some example cities and towns for you can pretty much just steal what they have in here. Then it goes to like sites, like lairs and dungeons, ruins, castles, strongholds, things like unusual phenomenon that happen in the area, mythology, history, and there's lots of random, things. I like a lot about the details on the Pantheon and how you can flesh those out. This book is just chock full of information, so check it out if you're interested in making your own setting.